Hello and welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Planner Podcast. This is Travis. Today we've got a lot of listener questions that we're going to be answering. These are questions that we've gotten over the past few weeks, and it's going to represent a really big breadth of topics. I'm excited to give back to our community. It's really great. I'm really grateful that you guys listen to this show. And, we try to do this every so often just to try to help people who listen to the show, get some of their questions answered, just recognizing that not everybody can afford our paid services. So let's hear what people are asking, and I think that you're going to benefit from a lot of these questions. So let's take question one about somebody who is right at the finishing point for forgiveness.
Hi, thanks for your podcast. Love listening. My question is that I had one payment left until forgiveness under the SAVE plan. My balance is about $34,000. So it was 20-year forgiveness that I was due to get. So now I'm wondering if I should switch to the old IBR because it'll be safe and stable and not go away. But then I'm looking at, I think, still 25 years forgiveness. But I'm a little confused about whether or not you think that forgiveness will be sticking around. And if there's a better option than switching to that, I'd love to know. My income is pretty low. I'm home with two young kids. My husband and I own a small business. Our AGI is about 78,000 a year. So I could file separately because the income is actually all in his name and just kind of ride it out until that 25 years. So I'm wondering if you think that's a good plan or if there's any way to get that one payment in and get forgiveness. And lastly, because we do own a small business, our income is pretty different than our AGI. Our payroll income is different. And I'm wondering if you know if they'll accept kind of a handwritten letter explaining what our actual income is with pay stubs. All right. Thank you so much.
So for this person, the short answer is I think they need to switch to IBR and pursue 25-year forgiveness because they're not going to get the 20-year forgiveness with the SAVE plan being on hold. The question is this plan safe and secure? The answer is yes, it is. It's now in the statute. It's in the law. IBR is also available on an uncapped or on a capped basis, rather. The new law makes it so that you can access IBR even without a partial financial hardship. So worst case scenario, if you have 20 years of credit and you need 5 more years, you could just write out 5 years worth of a standard 10-year type of payment amount and then be done, and you'd get roughly half of your balance forgiven. Now, with this person's income situation, filing taxes separately seems to make sense. The person might be able to qualify for a low or $0 a month payment. One thing to keep in mind, though, is, of course, depending on what state you live in, there's tax implications to this, right? So if you are in a common law state, you just can file separately, use your $0 income, and pay zero. But keep in mind that there would be larger taxes due every year when you file separately, because if you have a $0 income person married to somebody who's making, $70K, there's probably a few $1,000s of upfront tax expenses that you could maybe eventually get back if you ever file your amendments to make it joint. You have up to 3 years to do that. So, for this person's situation, generally speaking, that's probably what I would suggest to this person is just, yes, try to go get forgiveness, but, know that you might need to be filing years worth of tax amendments at some point to get maybe even as high as a low 5-figure sum refunded to you. So let's take another question.
I have been on the income-based repayment plan since 2008, 2009. I did go back to trade school in 2014 and then again in 2021, I think it is. I am still in the IBR and I have they told me that it goes until 20 years or 25 years. I want to know if I could have my loans discharged at that time or if I would be stuck and have to start all over or if I would be put in the wrap. I know that it's really close to being 25 years, but then I went back to school twice. So does that start me all over? My loans are only about $77,000 right now, but I just want to know if I'm going to be stuck in the next 30 years paying back all of my loans.
And so I could sense the stress in this person's voice, and I'm sorry that they're going through that. You can get it forgiven provided you have a low enough income to have a forgiven balance available. Now, people do not understand this broadly, what I'm about to say yet. If you are not on the IBR plan by July 2028 and you're an existing borrower, everybody gets swept into the RAP plan. The only exception is people who have ever had a Parent Plus loan are ineligible for RAP, so they would just automatically get switched to IBR as a backup. So, if you were on anything but IBR by July 2028, you would get switched into RAP. So that's something to be thinking about. It's something to be paying close attention to, because you would not want to get stuck on RAP and potentially have to pay 30 years total. You don't. Now, the good news is you don't get anything reset on you. It's a cumulative journey towards forgiveness. It's not like a restarting kind of thing unless you took out new loans. If you took out new loans, for a new program, then yes, those loans have to be paid back for, 25 or 30 years after the loan starts in repayment the first time, right? So that's, something to know, that it's not about resetting the clock for everything. It's just each loan has to have 25 or 30 years or 20 years if you're new IBR eligible. This person probably is not, because they mentioned 2008 as a date that they started taking out loans. So hope that makes sense. We're going to keep marching on because we have a ton of questions here.
Hi, Travis. I wanted to start off by saying I appreciate all the info you guys put out, and it really helps navigate in these uncertain times. So my question is about recertification. Basically, my new IDR plan just got approved. I got approved on the payee plan, switching from the save, with a new recert date of May 2026. Based on my 2023 tax return, I'm planning on filing my 2024 tax return as late as possible in October of 2025. I was wondering if I could recertify in September 2025 with that same 2023 tax return, allowing me to extend my recert date out to September of 2026, essentially allowing me to have a lower payment for 4 extra months. Not sure it works like that, so I would love to hear your answer for that one. All right, take care.
So this is a very common question. I just generally don't see it work out like this for people. I think generally speaking, you get your IDR certification date does not really shift all that much, right? So that would be a great idea in theory. It just doesn't work in practice. And so, this person's just going to have to recertify whenever they have, the requirement to do so, right? And generally speaking, you get asked, I think, roughly 90 days ahead of time. It's due, I think, roughly 35 days ahead of time. And then at the 10-day mark, it's considered late. And that's like the current guidance. That could always change or shift, right? But, I think if you're dealing with something like a big income increase, or, a need to file taxes a certain way to get a refund that you're waiting on or something like that, I would always play it safe and just let people know, just to have very conservative expectations on, what the servicers are going to do in terms of how fast they process things. So for example, if you recertify with a 2024 return and you're really hoping to use that 2024 return because the income you're showing is way lower than 2025, and maybe your recertification date is in October and you submitted it in September, and that October 15th is the date you have to file your final tax return, ultimately, what can you do, right? I mean, if it was me, I would probably use that 2024 extended return and then wait until the very last second to file my 2024 tax return, right? Like, you're not obligated to file it before the actual deadline. So if it's helping you out to use an extension, why would you file it early, right? Does that make sense? So in general, just be cautious, be careful. And I think it's fine to file an extension after a return's been accepted, after your IDR payment has been recalculated and the first one, comes out with the new levels. I think it's really fine to do that. So let's take another question.
Hi, this message is for Travis at Student Loan Planner. My name is David. I'm a incoming nursing grad student looking to obtain my RN license this next academic year. I'll be starting at a private nursing school in August 2025. It's a 16-month program, and after that, I was planning to continue on with the nurse practitioner training. There is about a 6 month gap, or 8 month gap rather, before the NP training starts, with my school that I got into. Um, uh, it's seamless in the sense that I don't have to reapply or apply to the NP, since that was bundled in my initial application to their nursing school. And so I'm wondering, as a incoming student, how I'll be impacted by the potential changes to the student loan limits, for the one big beautiful bill. I'm planning to take out the loans to cover, essentially max loans to cover my cost of attendance, and that would definitely exceed the $150,000 max. Would I be impacted, um, as a incoming student in August 2025, or is that bill only impacting students who begin their training and coursework academic year 2026? So, i.e., July, August 2026. So I'm just wondering if I'd be immune to any of these bill proposals, since I'm starting my nursing training this August. Again, I will be taking the max loans, which far exceed the cost, um, far exceed the 150K loan limit that is currently being pushed through Congress. Yeah, appreciate any feedback and insight that your team can provide. Thank you, Travis. Bye.
So folks need to understand that there's a lot that we don't know yet about how this is actually going to be done. And, very transparently, a lot of people need to know that the higher cost private universities, many of these universities' programs will be closing down with very little notice. And this is a prediction. This is something that I cannot guarantee will happen. But the reason why I think it's going to happen is because let's take an example of pharmacy schools. In 2004, before Grad Plus passed, it was about 43. Within, I think, 4 years or so, that was something like 95 or something enormous with Grad Plus. And it was every single year there was like 15 new pharmacy schools when Grad Plus initially got released, right? So on the downtrend of this, what could we expect? Because the final number of pharmacy schools ended up being like 120 or something like that, right? And each profession is going to be a little bit different because, I think that, each profession is going to have different dynamics in terms of how it's going to work and how expensive these programs are relative to the earnings. I will say that nurse practitioner earnings are some of the best debt-to-income ratios of any profession that we serve. I think that a lot of the debt-to-income ratio numbers are something in the neighborhood of like 125% of debt to income, and that's people that are coming to us with disproportionately high debts, right? So overall, the NP profession is in pretty good shape. And so I think that if your only choice was to take out marginal borrowing for private student loans to be able to complete the degree, it could be worth it as long as your total debt to income ratio is staying below 150%, meaning like, less than 150K of debt per 100,000 of earnings, right? Now, in terms of how this student will be impacted, for any program that you're starting August 2025, like that formal program, you can borrow as much as you need under the existing loan limits. But if this NP program, the formal NP program, starts after July 2026, you would be impacted by the new loan limits. And we don't really know how that's going to be handled. And the other thing that I wanted to transparently say to the student is we don't know if some of these very high cost private universities will actually continue to exist. What I would potentially anticipate is that some of them will shut down with very little notice because they're going to have very large expenses from, faculty, buildings, all kinds of administration that's, required. And if they lay people off, they might also be required to pay certain things like severance or benefits or, depending on state laws, right? So a lot of these universities, again, could shut their programs down with very, very little notice. So anybody who's going into a program after July 2026, in my opinion, you need to be asking the financial aid office and demanding answers about what happens if I ever need to transfer from this program. Can you please provide me an example of a student who transferred successfully and did their credits transfer? So what you want to do is you want to find a plan B option. Now, if you are going to, Georgia State University Pharmacy School, I don't even know if they have a pharmacy school. I'm just making up a lower cost public university just out of the blue, right? So there's nothing, this might actually be completely false. Maybe they are expensive. I don't know. But my point is you need that like backup public school that is relatively affordable, that if the education apocalypse happens, you could take your credits and transfer there and still complete your degree. If you don't have that option in the back of your hand going to a high cost private university anytime starting in mid 2026 or beyond, you're taking a risk. Is that risk something that is a wise risk? I don't know. It's hard for me to say. Any very high cost private schools in like the most expensive parts of the country, like California, New York, Chicago, any of these bigger, higher cost cities, I would say, in my opinion, it would be a little bit dangerous. Just because, again, what happens if the school suddenly closes? Could you apply for closed school discharge? Would this administration grant closed school discharge? I don't know. Now, I think that given the choice to become an NP versus staying as a RN, I think in most cases that decision definitely pays off, even if you're borrowing private loans. But I just think that people need to be asking uncomfortable questions and, when possible, get things in writing. So many of these situations where people come to me and say, my institution didn't tell me the truth, they took advantage of me. Part of the reason this happens is because they'll say something, but they won't put it in writing, and then there's no proof that they said something. So at least if they put it in writing, that could be grounds for a closed school discharge at some point, because you'd have evidence that you could show the Department of Ed, hey, look, my school said one thing, and then it was a lie, right? So just think about what's going to happen when a lot of universities are under pressure to continue existing, and when a lot of, grad schools are under pressure to continue to exist. There's going to be a temptation for them to, knowingly and unknowingly overstate things. So I'm just saying that because I think somebody should say it, because you as the consumer are ultimately going to be responsible for these loans, and you want to be thinking about, what is the truth in all these, with all these changes, what is going to happen? Well, if unlimited borrowing from the federal government tripled the number of schools in a lot of professions, it stands to reason that perhaps, a 50% decline in the number of schools in a lot of these professions is realistic, and the 50% that would be most likely to decline and go away are most likely going to be these higher cost private institutions that started their programs after Grad Plus began. So as a final, just like a little thought, if your school was created after 2006, there's a much higher likelihood that school will cease to exist than if the school was created before 2006, because that's when Grad Plus started. So little fun thought there. Let's take another question.
Hi, Travis. This is Yvonne. Thank you for all that you do for us student loan borrowers. So currently my loans are with MOHELA under quote unquote awaiting form administrative forbearance. It is accumulating interest, even though I was told by MOHELA that my interest would be changed to 0%. I'm in this situation where I completed a direct consolidation loan application back in April of 2024. Unfortunately, I did not realize I had to reapply for the SAVE plan after consolidating. As soon as I realized that, I did apply for SAVE. That was in June 2024, but as you know, these applications have not been processed, and mine is still in review. I became frustrated, so started making some payments. I was removed from the forbearance I was in and was placed in a standard repayment where my due amount was $1,270 per month. I did pay that for a few months until it became too much and called MOHELA to be put back into forbearance. That's when they told me I should have been on a 0% interest forbearance, and that the Department of Education would remove any accumulated interest. 2 months later, that hasn't happened, and I'm receiving a letter. Yesterday, I received a letter letting me know that interest will accumulate while in forbearance. I do plan to do PSLF since I work at a nonprofit clinic as a pharmacist. The reason that I consolidated in the first place was because I wanted to do PSLF, and my counts were a little off. Some of my loans had 22 months, the others had 7 months counted, and so I was told that if I consolidate, it would even out. So my question is, do you recommend I apply for income-based repayment plan, an IBR plan, to qualify for PSLF? Do you think my loans will ever be recounted even though I consolidated before all this BS started? And since I consolidated, am I at risk of not qualifying for PSLF? I'm scared. I hate that I can't trust anyone because things that are being said are not getting done. It's a very frustrating situation that we're all in. Well, again, thank you for all that you do.
I think what this listener said is, kind of that view is held by a lot of people, right? Like, I'm frustrated because things that people said that were going to be done are not being done. I think that for this borrower, first of all, you're not disqualified because you consolidated with the government. If you do a federal loan consolidation, you still have access to PSLF. Worst case scenario, it wipes away all the credit towards PSLF. Now, because of the weighted average consolidation rule that is theoretically still existing, you would get a weighted average of any credit if you consolidated via PSLF, but that's, a rule that I would expect is going to change in the Trump administration back to what it used to be, which is no credit if you consolidate. And then for the PSLF waiver, they were supposed to count the loan with the most amount of credit in the consolidation, but that had to have been done by a certain time, right? So I think what you want to do in this case is just model the worst case scenario, because any scenario better than that's going to be better. So the worst case scenario for this person is IBR, probably filing taxes separately if this person's married, and then seeing what the 10-year cost of that is, and seeing what that cost comparison is to paying it back. And then to look at the per year value of that, which is the total cost of paying it back compared to the total cost of PSLF. And then you calculate a per year number that represents as an indirect bonus amount. So you calculate what that number is. Maybe it's $20,000 a year in, pre-tax income that PSLF is worth to this person. Maybe this person's making $100,000 a year. So 100 plus 20 is 120K. And so the question would be, could you make more than 120K in the private sector or not? That's how you have to run this math. And that math takes away the anxiety and the stress, because then you're just looking at math. And then it's like, oh, okay, what's the best decision for me? So don't despair for this person. You're going to be okay. It's just going to be, with the Save for Parents ending, it's better to get on IBR anyway.
Hi, Travis. Thank you to you and your team for keeping us updated on all things student loans. I am a new grad, graduated in August of 2024, consolidated my loans, and then applied for an IDR plan in November of 2024. That still has not been processed, and despite many contact points with Ed Financial, they are telling me to hold off for the processing. I am wondering whether or not I should reapply. That would likely involve me using my 2024 tax return rather than my 2023, where I did make a little bit more money. And then I am wondering, if I hold off and wait, do you think that we will automatically be put onto the RAP plan if that bill passes soon? Thank you.
Short and sweet. Love it. Basically, I think that they're stopping any processing of applications that said, put me on the lowest plan. So I would guess this is what happened for this borrower, is she applied for an IDR application that said, put me on the lowest repayment plan. And, I think that you just need to reapply. studentaid.gov/IDR and request a specific repayment plan, and whatever tax return that's the most recent is going to have to be the one that you use, but at least you're going to get on a plan. So, make sure first choice is new IBR, right? And then you want to decide, if you're not eligible for that, do you do old IBR or do you wait around for RAP?
Hi, Travis. I was wondering, I called MOHELA to make sure they received my ICR application. I am a Parent Plus loan person who consolidated, and they told me that they are not processing any applications unless you are single or your repayment amount was $0. Everyone else, they said that they are not processing any IDR applications. So I didn't know if you had heard of this, or if there's any way to get around it. Thank you.
So for full transparency, some of these questions are older voicemail questions that were asked. And so let me just put everybody at ease to say that this was a temporary thing that was happening, and it's no longer the case that they're only processing this. So you can apply. Parent Plus borrowers can, that have consolidated, can apply for ICR if you've only done one consolidation. If you've done two consolidations because you've done double consolidation, you can go ahead and apply for the other repayment plans like the pay IBR plans. So this was a temporary thing that was true for like a couple weeks, and then it wasn't true again. So I know there's a lot of whiplash out there, but that's what happens sometimes with these kind of things, servicers say.
Good morning, Travis. Quick question. In a couple of months, I will be doing the PSLF buyback. My question is, once I reach my 120 payments and I send in my my certification of employment, and then they qualify me for the 120. Once I issue the buyback, should I go on forbearance for a few months and wait for them to send me the amount, or should I just keep paying the balance until they actually send me the how much my buyback will be? All right, thank you for your time and have a great day.
You want to just keep the payments going. I think it's better to keep the payments going because they're required to refund you anything that you overpay beyond the 120 months, right? So that's really saying that as long as you can afford those payments, as long as that's not going to put a strain on your household and your financial, picture, you want to keep those payments going because they'll refund it to you if for whatever reason you overpaid. I'm always a believer that you want these done as fast as possible, even if it does involve a little bit of a temporary overpayment, because what I've seen from a lot of public servants, to be honest, is like as soon as the loans are forgiven, people start thinking about more flexible job arrangements, right? Part-time, private sector, sabbaticals, and people want these loans done as fast as possible. So that would be why I would say just keep the payments going, and if you overpay, they'll refund you. Next question.
Hi, Travis. First of all, thank you and your team for all your passion and attention to this ongoing concern that we're all having with our student loans. I am calling about a question regarding the public student loan forgiveness. I hit my 10-year mark earlier this year in March. I'm in the SAVE program, so I have a number of months that never counted. In addition, I have a few months just before the pandemic where I went back to school and I went into deferment. I've asked at least twice to get information about the buyback plan. I'm ready to get this over and done with. In the first consideration, I was not actually given any answer. Instead, I was just given the fact that I've not met all the required months of payment, which I wouldn't because I'm in forbearance, both because of the SAVE plan and because of the previous months that I'm looking to buy back. So I put in a reconsideration request, and it's been over a month. I've not heard back, but my concern is whether or not I will actually ever get an answer, and I'm not sure how to move forward. Any light in this darkness that you can offer would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again.
So think in general how anything with Department of Ed is done. There's a window where they approve things and they accept things and they do things, and then a new administration or a new set of rules comes into place, and then suddenly they stop everything and they won't do anything anymore, right? So I would expect PSLF buyback is going to work somewhat like this. You submit the reconsideration request, you wait and wait and wait and wait. A lot of people get approved, and then suddenly, with very little notice, probably through a negotiated rulemaking session where new regulations are written, the Trump administration out of the blue comes out with a regulation that says, hey, because this buyback program was a Biden era provision, we are going to end it as of this date. And so we have no control over that. So let's just control what we can control, which is as soon as you are at 120 months of qualifying employment, meaning that you were employed full-time by a not-for-profit or government employer, you want to apply for that PSLF buyback reconsideration request right away, right? I counsel people to wait until you're pretty sure you're at the 120 months of qualifying employment, but of course you don't have to wait to get all that qualifying employment on file with Department of Ed if you're short of those 120. But once you are at the 120 months of qualifying employment, throw your hat in the ring, apply for reconsideration, and then we've seen it take several months in some cases. I think that there are ways potentially to speed it up. If you've waited a month without hearing anything back at all, then I would go to the FSA Complaint Center. I would just Google that and file a complaint and wait another couple weeks and see if anything happens, see if anybody answers the complaint. If nobody answers that complaint still, then you might escalate things to constituent services with your congressperson or senator's office and state truthfully that you are awaiting an offer to receive PSLF buyback and that offer has been ignored. And, can that office help you get a response one way or the other? I would go in the normal order of things, though. I would not start with constituent services. I would follow the normal process of procedures where you file the FSA complaint first. And to be honest, with all the Department of Ed chaos, I am not completely sure if the FSA complaint portal will work the same way that it did in the past, but that's still the normal course of action you should take until we know otherwise. So let's take another question.
Hey, Travis, thanks again for all you do, just keeping us up to date and in the loop regarding the student loan laws and regulations. I guess my question today is a little bit unique. And the fact that I've graduated from PT school a few years ago and am trying to go back to physician assistant school. And I would be enrolled in the program at the beginning of 2026. So presumably I would be a borrower before July 1st of 2026. And so it sounds like that would allow me to be grandfathered in for this transition period on how much student loans I could borrow. But I guess my question is, would my loans from PT school that were before 2026, July 1st, be under one income driven repayment plan, but then the loans borrowed after July 1st of 2026, would those be forced into the repayment assistance plan, especially if I'm considering public service loan forgiveness? Thanks.
So if you borrow at all after July 2026, you're pretty much going to need to expect to be stuck in the RAP plan for everything. And you would still qualify for PSLF. Like if you're borrowing unlimited amounts of loans, then you would still be able to qualify for PSLF on everything under the RAP plan. But it's important to realize that if PSLF for some reason doesn't work out, the consequences of going back to PA school are large, right? Because then you're paying on for 30 years on whatever you borrow from PA school, and the balance will probably be higher because you're borrowing probably for a private university in most cases, not all cases, but a lot of cases, a lot of these programs are the ones that popped up and also accept larger numbers of applicants, right? So it's disproportionately true that people that listen to our podcast are joining that kind of an institution. And just because they account for the majority in a lot of cases of seats in professional programs in many cases. And, if that's the case, then, just think about what the numbers will look like if you don't qualify for PSLF for whatever reason, right? Like, for example, let's say your only option for employment in your local town is a for-profit employer. What would that math look like? As long as you've checked out that math and as long as your program for PA school definitely starts before July 2026, then I think it's reasonable to go ahead and go and do that and follow that plan. But if it doesn't, then just realize that that's a risk. And, are you comfortable with the risk? I think I would be comfortable with this risk because it seems like this person wants a little bit more of a, frankly, a higher income profession. It's true that PAs on average in our email list make, I think, about 40% more than the average PT does. So, I think it's a reasonable plan this person has.
Hey, Travis. Thanks for everything you do for us, and especially during these hard times and very confusing times. I have a quick question about what to do right now, given that I am on the save forbearance, and I had actually applied to switch over to the pay plan in January of 2025 so that I could get back onto PSLF credits. Obviously, like everybody, I've lost a year of credits and I'm about 6 years in. Well, I would be 6 years in. And I called MOHELA in March and they said that they had just received the okay to start processing so that now the clock would start from that point, aka 90 days for them to process the switch into pay. We are now at 6 months from my original application, and now I'm seeing on the student aid website that they are requesting that you reapply and that my old application will be automatically canceled. And I'm really upset about this because I've already waited so long to get switched into pay, and I just want to start making payments again and getting my counts back. Is there anything I can do to pressure them to process that more rapidly, given that I applied 6 months ago for the switch? Or am I just going to be screwed and have to reapply right now? And then the clock starts again, and I'll have an even longer delay before they can process me into the pay plan. And so I could start making payments again. Second part of the question is, I assume this is the best thing to do in the meantime so I can start getting payments counted again, but it does sound that like with this bill passing that maybe it's possible to have to switch into the wrap plan later depending on some things. So I'm just curious if it makes sense to just switch into pay for now, get back on some payments and getting some PSLF credits, and then during the transition period between 2026 and 2028, like figure out what to do at that point. Thanks so much for your help, and I appreciate it if you can address this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you need to do is get unpaid, get the clock started again, reapply because probably they're putting your application on hold, possibly because that box was checked that said put me on the cheapest plan, and just reapply online, studentaid.gov/IDR, and apply for pay, and then just essentially keep those payments going until you're forced off of it, because the alternative is old IBR, which for anything PSLF related is generally more expensive than the RAP plan is going to be. So they would move you from pay to something else at some point, but continue doing all the smart tax stuff. Like if you're married, you might need to file separately for taxes, etc. And yes, like I think that they put your application on hold because they had this policy probably of not processing anything that said put me on the cheapest plan, but they didn't tell anybody that until like a couple weeks ago. So don't beat yourself up over something that's happened already. If PSLF buyback is around in a few years, you could also apply for that. It probably won't be, though, full disclosure, right? That's my expectation. So just model out the costs, see if it's cheaper to stay on PSLF, see if public service is still what you want to do, and just keep writing it out. And I know it's frustrating, but that's the best thing to do right now. So let's take another question.
Hey, Travis. Thank you and your team for all the info. Student loan planner's been extremely helpful in managing my student loan plan, and I hope to add to your already 2.7 billion you've helped others save. I have a loaded question about PSLF buyback while on save. I'm currently in the forbearance, and what would be my 120th qualifying payment is coming up in October. I'm wondering if I would be eligible for buyback for those 17 months while in the save forbearance, and if so, would I need to apply and be put onto a different IDR plan before sending my request for buyback, or could I request buyback while in or on the save forbearance? Thank you very much again for all that you guys do.
You can apply once you have 120 months of qualifying employment. So make sure now at studentaid.gov/PSLF that you've got all the employment credit on file, and that when you reach that 120 month of qualifying employment, apply for PSLF, submit that PSLF reconsideration request. Just type in PSLF reconsideration request and make the application and go for it. You don't have to be on IBR or some other repayment plan once you're at 120 months of qualifying employment. I promise I'm not getting choked up with emotion and saying this. I just, a lot of questions today and I don't have water. Haha. So let's take another question.
My student loan journey has transpired over the course of about 27 years, beginning in January of 1998. My journey consists only of graduate programs. I began a master's degree in January of 1998, and I completed and graduated from that program in September of 1999. From there, I went and worked on a PhD in August of 1999 through May of 2000. I flunked out of the PhD program, and I was told that once you leave a program, whether graduating or not, it's 6 months of non-payment, so your payment status doesn't kick in until 6 months later. So for me, that was November of 2000. So my understanding was my clock on payment began in November of 2000. So 25 years on a graduate program meant the clock would end in November of 2025 for time served, time payment forgiveness. I ended up going back and getting a second master's degree. I worked on it part time. I began in the fall of 2010 and took a couple courses. I then took a few more courses in the fall of 2011, and then I worked on finishing and completing it starting back in the spring of 2013, and then I graduated in August of 2013. So I'm not exactly sure if each time I stopped and did not continue taking courses, 6 months then added to those times. I did go through the SAVE plan and consolidated and yes, I suspected by doing so that I would lose some of my time served on the 25 years, but I would gain a lot more on the time. I'd gain another 10 or 12 years for those loans that I had taken at a much later date. And so for me, I felt like all that was worth it. So I did the SAVE program and consolidated all the loans into one. The loans were dispersed on the 21st of September 2023. I made payments in October and November of 23. A few weeks after I made the payment in November, I became unemployed. And then once I gained reemployment in March of 2024, the SAVE thing was all on pause. And so I've been kind of caught up in the mess of the SAVE and my employment for the last few years. As of right now, I've been told I have made 269 of the 300 payments needed for 25-year forgiveness. Throughout the course of this time, my background has been primarily in education or training, and some of that education was done directly with government entities. And so I was able to gain 44 of 120 months for public service loan forgiveness. My question or questions for you on the path forward is, what should I be looking to do? There, over the course of my roughly 25-year work history, I have predominantly been a contractor. So the check was written by a private entity, but I was on a staffing contract. So my supervisors were government employees. Other than a green stripe on my badge, I was or acted as a government employee. Again, the check was written by a private entity, but I, in all intents and purposes, was a government employee. I've had difficulty getting advice on how to proceed with trying to get those. And I mean, I was a substitute teacher for a government school district in Alaska, and the Human Resources Department refused to sign the form. And I have fought with the Department of Education for probably 10 years trying to get that credited because I can't force the people to sign the form.
I thought this would be a good question to include because it really does show the pain of a lot of student loan borrowers out there where, it's a long journey for some people. And I just want to acknowledge that. I mean, I think that the good news for this situation is that this person has about 30 months left that they could be on the IBR plan and then be done. And the thing that's an obvious thing to call out is that, if you reach that 300th payment and you're in, not in a public service job, then you're going to get hit with taxes on the forgiven balance, right? And so, the way I think about this is let's get these loans done. Let's get them out of your life and finished. And the best way to do that for this person is going to be IBR because of the 300 payments versus the RAP plan, which is 30 years worth of payments, right? Which is 360 monthly payments. And it might be taxable income. Now, depending on this person's assets, there's something called the insolvency exclusion. So for the IRS, if your assets are smaller than your total debts, when you have forgiven loans, a balance that's forgiven is considered to be tax-free. You just have to file a form at the IRS to disclose that to the IRS so that they don't tax you on it. So I think that this person just needs to plan on 300 months being the date that they need to hit to have everything done. And I think that also for example, let's say that this person wasn't able to make those tax payments that could be due if their assets are greater than their debts, then they would be taxed on that difference between the assets and the liabilities. So if that's the case, then potentially, maybe not for sure, but maybe the smart answer is to try to get on the RAP plan if this person qualifies for that when it rolls out. Potentially, if the goal is to push out that forgiveness date longer to get more time to plan. So I'm sorry for this person's pain, but know that I've never seen a situation that's beyond hope. There's all kinds of stuff you can do, even if you're an older borrower, like delaying claiming Social Security income, doing different things with retirement savings. I mean, there's still things that can be done. And just don't lose hope. That's my encouragement to that borrower. Let's take another question.
Hi, Travis. Thank you for so much of what you do at Student Loan Planner. I have learned a lot myself and learned enough that I was able to teach people some basics about student loans. I have kind of a weird question. I have a small student loan balance, so I'm not going for forgiveness. I want to pay it off, but my interest rate is also around 4%. So I haven't been able to find cheaper in the marketplace. I want to get on the standard repayment because switching to an income-based repayment is probably going to be more expensive for me than my standard repayment whenever I've done the calculations. I was wondering what I need to do to make that happen. Conventional wisdom says don't do anything and you'll get onto standard repayment. When I tried to sign up for automatic payments with NailNet, they said I can't because I don't have a payment due in the next 6 months, and my recertification date is August of next year. Please advise.
So keep in mind, you can always pay a payment on your own that the servicer says is not due. So I mean, the easiest thing to do instead of beating your head against the wall with the servicer is just to literally make that payment yourself and just go on their website and do it. I think that you should be able to also apply on your servicer website. Hey, I want to apply for a payment plan, but they don't always process this with all the IDR mess. So that would be my suggestion. It's not a great suggestion, but in between now and when this expires, just go ahead and get onto a manual payment schedule with them until they'll process something.
Hi, Travis. My name is Dan. I'm a physical therapist, and I currently have 100 documented payments toward PSLF. I've calculated that after April of 2026, I would have 120 months of qualifying employment when adding in the months that have been in forbearance, and I'm planning to apply for PSLF buyback at that time. Currently, I'm in the Save forbearance and applied for the pay plan in June, still waiting for the outcome of that, as I only plan to pay until April, which would be before the pay plan expires, and it offered the lowest monthly payment. My primary question is on filing for my 2025 taxes. I'm married, but we have always filed separate to reduce my IBR payment amount. My wife has no student loans. I'd like to file jointly for 2025, but am nervous to do this if for some reason my loans are not forgiven after the PSLF buyback. Am I taking a risk by filing jointly before loans are completely forgiven? If I file jointly and apply for an extension, could I go back and file separately if needed? Thank you for all the help and hope to hear from you soon.
So if you are very close to 120 months of payments, then I think that, you definitely need to think about doing buyback, and you also need to think about protecting yourself as much as possible, which in my view means filing taxes separately until you're completely done. And then you can always go back and amend your tax returns with 1040X from separate to joint to get any money refunded to you that you paid extra in taxes from filing separate. I think that's the safest thing to do. And if you've applied for pay and they're still waiting on processing it for you, then I think you might want to throw another application in and just do that at studentaid.gov/IDR and specifically request the pay plan. I think a lot of people are stuck in processing of IDR applications because of selecting, I want the cheapest plan. And that's a reason. People probably in a lot of cases have completely forgot that they did that. So I would just go throw another application on and specifically state pay. Now let's take another question.
Hi, Travis. Thank you and your team for everything that you do. It has really helped me to navigate my student loans, refer people to your podcast, and also just ask the right questions when I'm speaking to my loan servicer. Speaking of, I have changed my loan from a save plan back to the income-based repayment plan. I have a 25-year term ending in 3 years and 3 months of payments, which I started paying back today. And I will be applying for in-school deferment for about 15 months of those 3 years, 3 months remaining. So I'm trying to figure out if I should pay the full amount of interest on my unsubsidized loan, which is $74,000 at 6.25% interest. And I also owe $15,000 at 6.25% interest in subsidized loans. And the idea is that that won't be accruing while I am in school. Anyway, should I wait to pay that full interest amount since my payments right now are zero based on last year's AGI? Or should I go ahead and try and pay that full interest rate amount if I can while I'm in school, so that when this is forgiven, it isn't the tax mob is less impactful. So save that money now and set it aside, invest it, or in a savings or money market account, or try to pay down as much as I can while I'm in school. Any thoughts you have on this subject would be so helpful. And if this is a call that needs to be scheduled one-on-one, I can do that too. Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, let me just state that this is a very, very common misconception that people have. The only time you should ever pay $1 more on your student loans than you're absolutely minimally required to is if you were 100% sure you were not going to be pursuing student loan forgiveness. If you're pursuing student loan forgiveness, then by paying extra over and above what you are required to pay for any reason, all you're doing at best is saving yourself 30 to 40% in taxes on that forgiven amount that you would have to pay taxes on later when the loans are forgiven. So if you think about the, trade-off of paying $1 today for 30 or 40 cents 10 to 20 years from now in many cases, or 5 years from now, depending on how much IDR credit you have, that's a bad trade because that 30 to 40 cents is also degraded from inflation. So you should not pay any extra on this in-school deferment. You should pay the absolute minimum and think about, the only time you should be making extra payments would be when you're totally certain that you're going for, payoff if you're paying extra, and not forgiveness. So let's take a couple more questions.
Hey, Travis. My name is Matt. I've been following you since about 2021. So first of all, thank you so much for all that you do on this student loan stuff. My question for you is, for anyone that's under that pay-as-you-earn plan that's going to reach their 120 qualifying payments before July 2026, how should that person go about seeking forgiveness? Do we need to switch plans prior to we reach the 120 qualifying payments? Or can we do it after, go into forbearance? Please let me know any guidance you have on this. Thank you so much.
So the only situation where if you're on pay that you would be, prevented from getting PSLF is if like the courts struck down pay from any time between now when I recorded this and when this person applies for PSLF. If pay is struck down, then if you're not at 120 months of credit, you would need to go find another repayment plan that counts, like IBR. So I think this is a good solution. Go apply for PSLF when you reach your 120 a month of credit on pay, and keep your payment as minimal as possible. And if you get kicked off of pay, you'll have to do IBR, and then you ride out the rest of your 120 months on IBR. Now we're going to take one last question.
Hi, Travis. This is Shannon. I appreciate all that you've done, all the ins and outs of this crazy time. I have what I think is a quick question, but probably not. I have been on the Save Forbearance forever, and August 1st is coming right up. I have actually applied for the buyback. I achieved my 120 count in April, and I applied for the buyback in May, and I have not heard anything from anybody since then. And so I am trying to figure out whether I should just stay in the Save Forbearance, start paying some of the money that I'm going to have to pay for the when they start charging me interest, or move while I'm waiting to hear back from the buyback and move into the IDR. My problem is I was one of the early borrowers, so I would be in the old IDR, and I don't want to pay that much money every month. So I was thinking that maybe what I should do is pay myself every month, and start putting money away so that when I do finally hear back on the buyback and I find out how much I'm going to owe, I might have some money saved up to be able to pay that. Or I should shift and actually start paying so that my months start counting, because I have no idea how long I'm going to have to wait to hear back from them on the buyback, and I'm always afraid that they're going to just decide while I'm waiting that they're no longer doing the buyback. So I really just don't know what to do. I can wait a little bit longer, I guess, and see what happens through August, but I just don't really know which direction to go. I was hoping that you could help me with that. Whatever your ideas are, I would love to hear them. Thank you.
So if it's been several months already since you've heard back from them, I would probably escalate this. I'd probably file the FSA complaint, just Google that and then fill that out, that complaint. Wait maybe 2 to 3 weeks after that. And if you still haven't heard anything back, then start that constituent services request through, the best placed person that you can. If that's, somebody on the education committee in the House and the Senate, that would be my first choice. Probably the second choice would be if your person is up for a reelection or potentially a questionable reelection of whether or not they're going to win. They're going to be a lot more incentivized to put really excellent effort to their constituent services department, right? So that's the way I usually always kind of suggest, like, who do I go to like make this request? I always like letting members of Congress and Senate know, through these, encouragements to reach out to their constituent services, because it raises the awareness of members of Congress of, hey, what policies did Congress create that are not working very well, right? If you see a mass number of, passport requests because passport processing is so bad, Congress kind of realizes, oh, maybe we need to appropriate more money for like passport processing because it's a real mess. My hope is that, when people follow the normal course of steps, file the FSA complaint first, wait a little bit to see if they respond. If they don't, escalate it to the constituent services. That's just my best option at the moment for what to do. And hopefully at scale, this will make Congress appropriate more money for student loan servicing to fix this mess. That might be wishful thinking, though. So for this person, that's dealing with this question, do I switch onto IBR or not? At this point, I would write out save forbearance because you're already at 120 months and you applied a long time ago. So there's no real benefit in my mind from switching, to IBR, even though they will refund the payment if you make more than 120 months of payment credits. I don't think that that's necessarily a step that I would take at this point yet. I would probably wait to hear back from them about the results of this PSL buyback first through escalating things through like complaints, for example. And then if you, for whatever reason, get refused buyback, because let's say that they make a random policy to end buyback, retroactively, unexpectedly, then you just want to calculate what would the IBR payments look like if I was forced to pay out X amount of payments on IBR under the new rules, which no longer require a partial financial hardship to access IBR, which creates an opportunity for people to access basically the standard 10-year payment amount on IBR and get credit for PSLF that way, or forgiveness or whatever else you need to get. So that comes to the end of all the questions that we got. That might be a very long episode for folks. I don't know if it's longer than people want to hear, but I thought all the questions were good. And I thought I would just try to feature as many of them as I could on this episode. So if you have questions like this, if you are curious to think, what would Travis say about something, I do enjoy getting your questions. If you go to studentloanplanner.com/voicemail, you type that into your phone, it's going to take you to a place that you'll be able to, record roughly a minute question is best. Because we try to feature as many of them as we can, right? So if you just ask maybe what you think is a straightforward question, about a minute in length, but don't worry if you go a little over, a little under that, other people probably have the same questions that you do. So just wanted to offer that to our listeners like you, if that's at all interesting. We have also brought on a couple additional student loan consultants to try to ease the crush of demand that we experienced from the save interest forbearance ending August 1. The payment forbearance is continuing for folks that choose to stay in it, but at some point the payment forbearance is going to end too, probably when we see a court ruling from the 8th Circuit. But regardless, it's never a fun experience having people have to wait, something like 6 to 8 weeks for an appointment. That's what was happening very recently. And I think and hope that with some of the additional hires that we made, we'll make that wait, maybe a week or two instead of several weeks, hopefully by the time you hear this. So if you need a consult, go to studentloanplanner.com/book. If you are a SLP Wealth client, of course, we can help you, as well in the context of your financial plan if you have questions about your student loans. So you can go to start.slpwealth.com if you are interested in becoming a financial planning client, which is a larger expense because there's larger amount of services provided, right? There's coordination of your financial plan and your student loan strategies. For the student loan consult, that's a great way for people that just transparently want a one-off engagement. That's just a pure, what do I do with my student loans? you don't need financial planning, you don't want financial planning, that's a great option for people just to do the student loan consultation service, which is a one-time thing, and you can do it again when and if you need to, right? And then, of course, if you have a very low income and you cannot afford any of our services, thank you also for listening to our podcast. Thank you for what you do for society. A lot of times people that make a lower income are doing, more public service, type of jobs, or jobs that require a lot more, hands-on intensive, labor than sometimes people that like me that get to sit at a desk get to do. And also thank you to our high income listeners that are doing really difficult work, right? I mean, I don't want to forget you guys either. There's obviously a lot of, physicians out there, dentists, veterinarians that are doing, higher paid than average work, but the work is also really intense and can be really stressful and tiring at times. And so thank you for the work that you do. We love all student loan borrowers here. We don't love just some. And, we are very appreciative of you spending time out of your day listening to this podcast to hopefully get some answers and some stress relief to anything that you might be going through. So, a couple links there that you can use. The voicemail link I mentioned earlier, the studentloanplanner.com/book link. And then, if you at some point wanted to do financial planning, slpwealth.com. Thank you so much for listening to the Student Loan Planner podcast. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Are you on the free Student Loan Planner email list? If yes, you could upgrade your experience and discover student loan loopholes so good, they might get repealed if I talk about them publicly. Find out my very best thought leadership that I really just can't be super open about anymore, unfortunately. If you want to get our very best tips, not just the ones that I can share for free, then go to studentloanplanner.com/insider to get a special discount for your year membership. That's studentloanplanner.com/insider and get our very best dozens of bonus content and tips that's going to save you money and get you out of student debt faster. And if you're already an SLP insider, please reply back to those emails and let me know how I can make it even more valuable.